All right. Hi, everybody. It's Christina with Craft Beauty Lab. We are a skincare manufacturer in Tucson, Arizona. And I have with me today Dr. Kathy Orlick with Foothills Dermatology. Her and I are great friends, and we spend quite a bit of time hanging out, talking about all kinds of ingredients, skincare trends, all the things. And we thought we both get a lot of questions from our clients around this, and we thought we should just do it live and you guys can hear what we chat about. So we're going to chat today a little bit about skincare trends. Noelle, who's also on with us, she's the one on TikTok. I don't think either one of us are.
No.
But she put together a list of things she's seeing. So we're going to chat about what we think about that. We're also going to talk to you a little bit about ingredients that we like and don't like. And if we have time, we'll also talk about what you think really is the best of a basic skincare routine, as well as or diet. And does that really impact how your skin looks? So we're going to jump right in and let's talk about, we're going to go trends. So I have on my list here, let's talk snail mucin.
Okay, start the day off with snail mucin.
Yes. So you tell me, have you heard about it?
I have.
Okay. What have you heard in the doctor world?
So I heard that snail mucin was discovered by some workers in Southeast Asia that work with snails, and they found that their hands were so much smoother after working with the snails. So of course, once you discover something like that, you want to put it out on the market for a skincare product.
Mm-hmm.
And so it does moisturize the skin very well. But from what I understand with the products that are on the market, they're
Mm-hmm.
mostly water. Very little true snail mucin.
Okay.
And there have been some questions about the ethical sourcing of the snails. They do have to be stressed in order to produce their mucin.
Okay. I would imagine, just in general, knowing what that ingredient is, that it's probably mostly water to start with.
Exactly.
Have you seen anything on the study side? I don't know if there's actually a ton of studies on it. It's probably more anecdotal. My skin feels soft. About is it more or less effective than another ingredient or anything like that?
I haven't seen any studies on it, but I'm sure it's comparable to other moisturizers on the market.
Interesting. So I think probably just, we'll put it into a category. It's probably a little bit more trend than something we would say is going to end up being a fantastic ingredient, especially given that there is the question around, is it distressing to the animal itself? And talking around, ingredients maybe that would be better than that. And I think there's probably a ton of ingredients on the market. My impression too is a ton of ingredients that will perform as well, if not better than it. And so why not get something from a plant or, instead. All right. We're going to put that one up into, it's not horrible. How do you feel about animals? But also there are probably things that are going to be better. Now we're going to talk about, what else is on her list here? Biomimetic skincare. Have you heard of this? So this is the idea that the only things that you should put on your skin are the things that the skin produces itself.
Correct.
Right? So the skin does produce things like hyaluronic acid, and it produces a lot of really fantastic things.
Mm-hmm.
My impression is when I look at it is that, but just like the internal in your body is, we're not actually just designed to produce 100% of the things that we need. We're designed to intake things. So, we don't produce a whole lot of things, in my opinion, that we also do need to have on the skin. What's your thinking around that?
I mean, I think, I agree. I think that we're going to have to apply, as we age, we're not going to be able to produce the things in our skin that we need or just natural aging. And so in order to maintain the hydration of your skin, the collagen production in your skin, we'll need to apply something in order to maintain that. Okay. So
I agree with that. So that one I think I don't think there's any downside to using ingredients that are, certainly there's an upside to using ingredients that your skin does naturally produce, but it's not the only things that you would want to be using. I think would be the way that we would position that one.
And how is that presented on a product? Like, would you go to the store and see how does How is it labeled?
I don't know. Noelle, do you want to chime in on that? Is that I don't even know that I've seen it like on a product. I've never actually had a client come talk to me about it has to be biomimetic. Clients talk to me all the time about it needs to be natural, but that's not really the same thing as far as that goes. Let's see here. So let's talk about slugging. Have you heard of that?
I have heard.
Not snail mucin. Slugging, totally different.
Slugging. So my understanding of slugging is when you are applying multiple layers of moistures and then you seal it in with Vaseline. So Vaseline, petroleum jelly is one of the best, probably cheapest moisturizers in the world. But so the idea is that you moisturize your skin with different products and then you seal it in with that Vaseline.
And is that because it's occlusive and like it's going to like, so I think let's talk about Vaseline for a minute then actually, because I know that most people would associate that as a bad ingredient because I think people think it's comedogenic. People think it's certainly thick and, all of that kind of stuff. And it's petroleum based. So, there's conversations around that environmentally and things like that. But talk to me just about it from a dermatologist perspective.
Well, actually, we recommend Vaseline if you like that feel to it. I mean, it's a great moisturizer. It does help seal your skin barrier. So you have less water loss. You have less antigens coming into the skin, and so it's a great moisturizer. However, it's greasy, and a lot of people don't like that.
It's very greasy,
and the thickness of it is the issue. And
interesting.
It can be occlusive, or it is occlusive, but it can be comedogenic, meaning it can produce acne if you have a tendency towards that.
Okay. All right.
But if your skin is really dry, it's a great moisturizer.
It's not the worst thing that you could put on your skin.
Exactly.
Separate again from conversations around environmental or how was it, and where's what's the actual production process of it and things like that.
Right.
And certainly stay away from it if you're acne prone.
Correct.
Okay.
I have a question.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a question that kind of came sort of at the end of the biomimetic ingredients topic. So this question is, how do you know when you're using too many ingredients or layers, and does the skin need a break from those routines?
So, okay, say that again. Too many.
How do you know when you're using too many ingredients or layers?
Oh, so we're talking about slugging, kind of more like in terms of like layering stuff on.
And there's also a term called skin cycling that some doctors are promoting. And what that indicates is that you cycle your ingredients. So one night you use hyaluronic acid, the next night you use your retinoid. And there's some idea that maybe you're giving your skin a break.
From the one ingredient, but you're not giving, you're not sort of stepping back and all the things that you want to be using are active.
And then that's for me is more of a common sense thing. I mean, if you are using a retinoid that's causing too much irritation and like peeling, then obviously you're going to skip and use it every other night. And so there's nothing wrong with that. I think if you're, when you say using too many products, I think for sure there's ingredients that are going to counteract each other, and
as well as you'll stop getting things to actually absorb into the skin at some
point.
So if this question is specifically around slugging, let's say like you're trying to put all the moisturizers on and seal it in, my comment to that would be that it's at the point where if you keep putting the layers on until they stop absorbing, once you have a layer that's on the top that's not absorbing, there's no point in putting any more layers on, right? In terms of thinking about what's too many products, or at what point are you just not getting effectiveness of products anymore? What you just said is huge, right? Which is the biggest thing I think is, and I think you're going to talk about that probably in the things we don't like section, but we can kind of go over there right now, which is, I know you talk a lot about when you apply multiple products with different types of ingredients, that they actually can be counteracting each other, that they can actually So separate from the conversation around at what point are you putting another layer on that's just not getting into the skin anymore because of the other stuff you put on. So that's one consideration. And the second one is that you actually could be counteracting them and kind of nulling all the things that you just stuck on, right? Do you have specific ingredients that are highly on your radar for that, like that you should never be using together?
Well, for our acne patients, you cannot use a retinoid cream with a benzoyl peroxide. They just don't, it just can't, not that they cancel each other out, but there's an interaction. And so you don't want to ever use a retinoid with the benzoyl peroxide together, unless it's formulated correctly. There's a brand new prescription product for acne on the market that does have benzoyl peroxide in a retinoid. However, I think
just as general, if they're two different products, stay away from it. Would that then be like, is it okay if you use, say, a retinoid in the evening and the benzoyl in the morning? Is that enough of a separation?
Yes.
Do you have to have washed the retinoids off?
No.
So that, okay. So it's just a matter of time. So
exactly
8 hours apart kind of thing would be fine. Okay.
fine.
So hopefully that answered at least part of that question. Moving, we're going to do,
oh, sorry. We have one more question about the slugging.
okay.
Are there natural ingredients that can be used for slugging instead of petroleum?
Yes, absolutely. Really any kind of a very thick, so when you think about it, like layering, as if you're doing this, you want to start with your thinnest. If your point's really like a super hydration, start with your thinnest ingredient. A lot of times that's like a hyaluronic serum or something like that. And then you can, start layering up and really, I think, get a very similar impact from probably almost any oil, from any really, thick cream or well-formulated thick cream. You just keep applying it until it just isn't going to absorb anymore. So you have a layer sitting on top of the skin.
Correct.
Would that be?
Right.
Yeah.
And the other thing about slugging or hyaluronic acid in general is that hyaluronic acid and glycerin are humectants. So they absorb water from the skin and from your environment. So it's best to put them on when your skin's damp so they can actually absorb the water at the same time.
Yeah. That's actually something I think a lot of people don't maybe know in general with ingredients. Like, so I know that's true with like retinoids too, which is, basically if your skin is damp, it's conductive. And so almost everything is going to penetrate further and deeper. So humectants are really good that way too, but also things like, say, retinoids, you don't necessarily even want that to happen. So that can make people really sensitive, right? So if they wash their face and then apply that ingredient immediately, they'll get more irritation. So really strong ingredients, if you're getting irritations, that's probably the first thing to think about doing, besides backing off from it a little bit, is that you want to stay away from when you just washed your face.
Right. Let your skin dry for 10 minutes.
But hydrating ingredients, more hydrating if you have some moisture on your face. Exactly. That's also why using a nice mist can be good too.
Exactly.
Because that also probably helps that the ingredients that are in that mist penetrate deeper into, and you apply the moisturizers over it.
Right.
So,
right. And,
true.
Back in my teenage days, toners were used to strip the oil off your skin. Sea Breeze is the classic toner when I was a teenager. But now toners are used more to set that pH of your skin, to moisturize your skin, to prep your skin so the other ingredients that you're going to apply afterward can get absorbed better.
Yeah, I think very often, like, it's actually just, it's pretty simple, right? It's good because they'll have some good ingredients in them, other than maybe like the acidic products or, AHAs and things like that. You really shouldn't have a product that is messing with the pH of your skin anymore. Right. So, when you think about that step of toners and mists, and they'll be like, it's preps, it increases penetration and stuff. That's really all they're talking about, is that it's a moisture, humectant, it's a moisturizer on the skin, it's water. And so water in general being conductive is going to make almost everything penetrate further into the skin.
Right. Maybe you can talk more about the pH of the skin and how important that is.
Oh yeah, wow.
I know we talked about that the other night.
Well, and talking about questions that we'll get sometimes, and so I get questions sometimes from clients, because especially like when it's trending, the idea of like the alkaline diet internally being anti-inflammatory, and You know, people will ask me like, how do I find an alkaline skincare routine? You know, because of course, if you're doing it internally, it must be good externally. And you know, that's my kind of first one is that no, like the skin is designed to do things for you very, very differently than your internal system. And very often it's not at all the same. Like certainly there are certain ingredients that are great for you internally and not externally, but the alkaline is very, very bad. And you always want your skin. So your skin always needs to be acidic. It's the barrier that keeps things from getting in. And so when you do things that make your skin get into the alkaline pH range, and this is why I always talk about pH and why it's so important, is it's basically gets rid of it creates holes in that barrier in your skin. And that's where bacteria and all kinds of things get in that start to imbalance the skin. When you're getting, you know, all those breakouts or your skin is itchy and dry and rashy and you can't get it to be moisturized. That's really like your first one is like, am I paying attention to that? So no on alkaline. And I have no doubt you totally agree with me on that. Yeah, that's definitely, I think most people know that, but you know, it's always amazing because you're so like immersed in the industry that you don't really know what people know. And so it's good to kind of go back to basics sometimes too. Let's talk about skinification. I had to ask Noelle what this even was, but I think you know what this is.
So skinification is a term that's trending lately. And what that indicates is that you are treating the skin on your body just as you're treating your skin on your face. So you're using ingredients and products that are moisturizing or maybe exfoliating or help with collagen production. You're not just using that on your face. We're using it on the rest of our body.
All right, I have a couple of questions about this actually. So one is that, you know, like as a whole, that seems like a good idea, right? Like I look at my hands and I am like, I have the hands of an 80-year-old. I wish I would have done the same things that I do to my face for my hands. So I think that, you know, at least it's certainly, especially like parts of the body that are exposed.
Exactly.
So, I mean, that's kind of like my first initial instinct is like, oh, that's probably a really good thing. But then my second thought was this, is that, do you think, like, especially if you're using, say, like a lot of actives or kind of more aggressive products on your face because you've been used to it and you do things on your face a lot. I do see that probably sometimes with people, you know, is there a possibility that like something could be way too strong for parts of the body because it isn't used to using anything? That's my question.
Well, certainly the neck and the chest, I think, are even more sensitive than your face.
Okay.
So a lot of times patients will use like a retinoid cream on their face at night, and then they apply it to the neck, and particularly and sometimes the product gets in the creases of your neck and then can actually cause a lot of irritation. So I always tell patients to be very cautious about that. You know, start just a couple nights a week if you can do it, and then work up to as many nights a week as you can. I mean, my feeling is, you know, it's better than nothing. So if you're doing it twice a week, using retinoid is going to be better than not using it at all. But that's definitely
no. And is that true? Would you say twice a week? Because I've heard 3 times, like you have to be able to use it 3 times a week. But would you say twice a week is adequate for it to be effective for you?
I mean, I think any nights a week is going to be more effective than not using it at all.
Okay.
I don't think you're wasting it if you're only doing it twice a week.
And so let's actually talk about, because we've mentioned retinoids a ton because they're such a core ingredient. But let's talk about that. Like, tell me about retinoids, the different types of retinoids, and what can people do if they're not going to get a prescription for a retinol? Like, what are the effective, more natural versions of that? Are there effective, more natural versions of that? Give me a little rundown on retinoid.
So retinoids are a form of vitamin A, and they're prescription strength, and then they're over-the-counter strength. And the over-the-counter strengths, the mildest one is retinol. Like
Retinol.
NYL. And retinol has to go through 3 transformations in the skin to convert to retinoic acid, which is tretinoin. And so obviously in order to do that, it's fairly mild. The most common one that most of us have heard about is retinol, and NOL. And retinol is a form of retin-A that has to convert twice in order to form into retinoic acid. Retinol is effective. It's over-the-counter strength, and it's stable as an ingredient, and you probably could speak to this a little bit more. So it's added to a lot of ingredients, and retinols, retinases do primarily two things. So they exfoliate the stratum corneum. So they're removing the top dead skin cells that have to shed off eventually anyway. And so they help brighten your skin. So they're brightening up your skin by removing that top layer. They also have been shown to produce collagen fibers and help restructure your collagen fibers. So that's where retinols also help with fine lines. So I always tell patients, you could start a retin-A cream or a retinol when you're 15 for your acne and keep going till you're 105 for your wrinkles.
Okay, so then I have questions around that.
Okay.
So one is, I know a lot of people don't like definitely retin-A because they've had really harsh experiences with it. You know, it's like their skin goes crazy. It's just dry and breaking out all the time they use it, even when they're not using a ton of it. And then I've also heard this caution question mark about using if you use them like too much or get into too strong a strength, that it can make your actually start to make your skin really thin or something like that. Is that real?
Well, I think when people talk about using like a prescription strength retin-A too much, you're actually exfoliating the stratum corneum almost too much, and your skin can get a little shiny. There's also another over-the-counter strength called retinaldehyde, but it's not very stable, and it doesn't. It's hard to produce.
I have seen that in I've seen that in a lot of I'll call them non-prescription med spa type formulas.
Exactly.
And then, would you say, when you say not very stable, do you mean like in a lot of the formulas you'd see it and it's not really very stable in terms of?
No, I think it's hard to formulate into a product.
Okay.
That's my understanding, but it's about 1,000 times stronger than a retinol without it being a prescription. But then the prescription strengths are the tretinoin. So that's the retin-A that everybody's familiar with.
Now, what about, I might not pronounce this one right because I see it pronounced many different ways all the time, but bakuchiol.
Bakuchiol.
Yeah, I've seen it pronounced so many different ways. Even though I work with it, I am like, I'm not sure that there is a consensus of how this one is produced. But that is considered like the retinol alternative,
correct?
From a natural, plant extract. So tell me about, what do you think about that? Like, have you seen that it's working? Or
it's shown to stimulate collagen production and without the irritation. So that's a very new product that's been on the market that's very effective.
And what about, so typically I know that when we talk about prescription, the difference between, say, prescription and the non-prescription, if you're talking about those conversion steps, is that it takes a lot longer to see effects. Is that kind of going to be the same thing? So you're looking at, you can kind of feel a retin-A in your skin after 3 days, kind of a thing. Like you can sort of just feel your skin feeling differently. But would it be fair to say, probably give it 6 weeks to see, but that over time it really could be as effective or close to as effective as the prescription? I
think when we prescribe retin-A products, we usually tell patients you have to give it 3 months. For collagen production. So I think with the over-the-counter, you're going to be looking at more towards a year to see that. So, but you're going to get the same effects, and you just have to be consistent with it.
So the same effects, if you're consistent with it as the prescription and you get it in a natural format, just need to be really consistent with it. Now, does it have any other kind of upfront benefits as far as the exfoliating feature that, say, retin-A has? So you'll still see some benefits earlier. You just won't necessarily see the collagen benefits earlier.
Correct. And then it can also help with brown spots, latent brown spots.
Yeah. Right. So I know, because it's definitely anything in that category I would put that in the gold standard of, there's tons of studies around it. There's no doubt about the efficacy. So, but I was really curious, what you had seen. I've been looking at some of the studies and on the more natural versions of it, and so I like hearing that as a dermatologist, you're like, yes, we are seeing that too. So that's very cool. I have an interesting one now. you had talked to me about this, and this is something I had never thought about. So let's talk for a minute about tattoos.
Oh, okay.
And you had mentioned to me, you know, we're going to put this in the category of trends because it's, I mean, it's really more than a trend. It's like a entire lifestyle choice now for several generations, I would say, you know, with this increase in tattoos on the skin. And you were talking to me about health and skin impacts of tattoo ink. And I had never even thought about that. So tell me a little bit about what you were reading about or what you saw about that in the studies.
Yeah, so I've been hearing more and more about tattoo ink, and in the United States, tattoo ink is not regulated. And I found out here in Arizona, the only regulation is that a tattoo artist has to use sterilized needles. That's it. That's the only regulation.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, how is that even possible when it's like an injectable, basically?
Exactly.
So it's not something I know a lot because obviously we don't use tattoo ink in ingredients and, you know,
Right.
in formulation manufacturing, but that just seems impossible to
Right.
me that would be the case, that there's no regulation around
Right.
making the actual ink.
Ink, right. And some of the tattoo inks are similar to those that are used in the automobile paint industry. And so in Europe, the United Kingdom has just banned, as of a few years ago, they banned the use of azo pigments. Azo pigments are blue, yellow, greens. The only pigments that are allowed in the UK right now for ink tattoo ink is black and red. Because there's been some concern that azo pigment could potentially cause cancer.
Wow.
And what I read, which I found was really interesting, is the fact that if the ink is large enough, your body cannot absorb it. Your body can't ingest it and take it through your lymphatic system. But if you break that ink up with a laser, like so a tattoo removal, those particles are made smaller, and then you may be ingesting those and taking them to your lymph system, and then potentially creating, exposure to carcinogens.
That one blows my mind because, you know, I like to think I know lots of things about skin, and it's like something I had never thought about. So the idea around tattoo ink could actually potentially be dangerous for your health, and removing it could also be even more dangerous for your health.
Right, I know, which is
also crazy.
Yeah, especially since 30% of the Americans have a tattoo.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's pretty interesting. So I don't know, and I have not ever looked into this, but if you're listening to this right now, I mean, the main point of that would be that if you're thinking about getting a tattoo, is there research you could do into what types of companies and the inks that are being produced?
Right.
Because so many people do have tattoos now and have a lot of them covering a lot of their body.
Exactly. And that's the other concern. I mean, particularly for patients that have like an entire sleeve, or I have a patient that has tattoos pretty much from her neck down, is that it's very difficult to do a skin check, and that melanomas have been missed because of patients' tattoos, that you can't determine what's a concerning mole and what's the ink.
Okay. That one is like, when you mentioned that to me the other day, I was like, I've never even thought about that before. So I imagine most people haven't, because I do a lot of studying in skin things. So,
and then and I know the United States and Canada now is looking at potentially regulating the ink industry.
It seems like something that, should happen, or at least some studies should be happening around there, simply because, I mean, it's such a generational thing, right? It's really been in the last 2 generations that you're seeing that be something that's kind of more than just, one little tattoo somewhere kind of thing. Okay, well, that one is the heads up one. So let's talk about here. We have talk to me about high molecular versus low molecular weight hyaluronic acid. Okay, first of all, starting with, do you like hyaluronic acid?
Yes.
Yes, right. We all like hyaluronic acid.
We all have hyaluronic acid in our dermis.
Yes, that's one we produce ourselves.
Exactly. But as we age, the production goes down, and so hyaluronic acids. We found that high molecular hyaluronic acid cannot be absorbed through the epidermis very well. So it's a great moisturizer. But so it's great to apply high molecular weight hyaluronic acid, that's hard to say, onto the skin.
Okay.
They absorb water. They absorb 1,000 times their weight in water. But we found that low molecular weight hyaluronic acid actually can penetrate and help with collagen production. So now there are companies that are working on developing products that contain both. And hopefully they'll be labeled that you could tell they're multiple molecular weight hyaluronic
I was going to
acids.
say, like, so that's a big question for me when I think about ingredients. Like how could you tell, or could you tell on a ingredient deck if it was really high or low? There's probably like not an inky standard for that, like listing those
Right.
differently. So you kind of just have to trust that the company, if they say it has both, that it is both. Is that?
I think now products are coming out now that'll say multiple molecular weight or high and low molecular weight hyaluronic acid.
Interesting. I will do in my side, as you know, formulation, a little more research around that in terms of what actually equals effectiveness and efficacy with that. Because it's easy to say, you know, to write that, and but what does that actually mean in your ingredient deck? And how much of it do you need to have an impact? So that'll be something I'll be doing a little more research around for myself. All right, we're continuing on here with trends.
I have a question about hyaluronic acid, actually.
Okay, what's your question?
So are there any concerns with using hyaluronic acid when living in a dry desert climate? They've heard that it can pull the moisture from your skin, causing your skin to look and feel drier.
No. It's the short answer. No. So that's one of the things, the reason that we both like hyaluronic acid is that it doesn't pull water from the skin. Now, in a dry climate, you're probably going to want to layer that with another form of moisturizer. So you put, a thin layer of your the hyaluronic tends to be usually in thinner formulations, and then you'll put a thicker layer of a denser moisturizer on over it. But hyaluronic does not pull water from the skin, which is, we wouldn't like that ingredient if it did that.
You're right. And that's again where you want to put it on damp skin first.
Yeah.
So that that water that you're putting on the skin and then applying the hyaluronic acid, that will help plump up your skin.
Yeah, it'll draw it into the skin.
Into the epidermis. And that's, that's where all of our cosmetic fillers come from. Most of the fillers that we use are hyaluronic acid. So we're injecting it into the dermis. And I tell patients, after you have a hyaluronic acid filler procedure, you want to drink a lot of water. And
that's interesting too. That's good information. And that does actually help it, like actually draw the water in if you've done like fillers and things like that. So. Interesting. I didn't know that.
Yes.
Okay, here we've got this idea. Tell us, Noelle, can you hear us? Tell me about skinimalism.
Oh, skinimalism is my favorite. So skinimalism is something that I talk to a lot of people about when they're always asking. So they are always looking at what are going to be the most effective products that they can use instead of doing a 10-step skincare routine. One of the biggest trends is paring that down to 2 or 3 different products instead of the whole 9 yards. So what are the benefits of that, or what could that look like, or what could the most effective routine be for skinimalism?
Let me ask you this, does that, when you say, so the trend skinimalism, which obviously isn't going to have a legal definition or anything, but when you say that, are you talking about using the fewest number of ingredients or the fewest products? Because that's slightly different things.
Honestly, it's a little bit of both. Some people look at skinimalism as an approach to using the fewest ingredients possible, but getting that efficacy, and using the more natural ingredients and streamlined routines versus paring down their entire routine from, 15 products to a couple. So both approaches, actually.
So I would be curious from your perspective of like, I think we both probably agree you can easily have a skincare routine that only uses 3 products. Like you can have a great skincare routine with 3 products. But what would those 3 products be for you? Would you say like
gentle cleanser,
moisturizer,
sunscreen.
and a sunscreen. So you
Right.
wouldn't even put a serum in there. That's interesting. Like,
Well, I mean, if you were literally, if you were going to a desert island, you can only take 3 things. Those are the things that I
okay.
take.
So could you do a gentle cleanser, serum, moisturizer with sunscreen? Now you still only have 3 products.
There you go. There you go. Well, and I think the skin minimalism is trying to get the most bang for your buck.
Mhm.
You know, I mean,
Mhm.
if you look at some skincare routines, like the Korean skincare routine,
Yeah.
where they have 10, 15 different
This is
things
kind of
they're
that
laying.
backlash from that of
Right.
like, is it really necessary? And I
Right.
think both me from like an ingredient deck formulator side and from the dermatologist side is like both of us would very strongly say it's not. Like you
Right.
do
Yeah.
not need to have 11 products in your line.
Right.
But
But I think if you use products that contain 2 different ingredients, you know, that might, you know, like if they have a hyaluronic acid and a glycolic, I mean, that would
yeah.
pair
There's
down
a
your
lot of active ingredients that play very well together,
Right.
and you can have them in one product. You know, what you're always looking for is like, does it have enough of it in it to be effective?
Right.
Which can be hard to tell because you can't tell that from the ingredient deck, right? And yeah, do they play well together? Do they, you know, are they canceling each other out? Now, this might be a harder question, and it kind of, this is getting into sort of like favorite ingredients or things that we like. But if you had to just like, I'm not going to say you have to pick 3 ingredients, but if you were just going to pick
Put me on the spot.
well, like, okay, what would be favorite ingredients in that regard? Like if you were really going to be minimal
Mhm.
about your ingredients themselves, what do you think matters most? Now, this is a tricky question because people have also different skincare goals, right?
Right.
So like if
Right.
your biggest issue is hydration or pigmentation or,
Right.
you know, versus elasticity, you know, that's kind of a hard question, but just off the top of the head, give me a couple favorites.
Vitamin C.
Always.
I always like vitamin C. And that's considered an alpha hydroxy. So that would be.
And a huge antioxidant, right?
And
So
a
you're
huge
getting both.
antioxidant, exactly. And then, you know, I'm a big retinoid user at night. So I think it can do multiple things. Like I said, 15 to 105. So, and hyaluronic acid is just a great moisturizer. So, and then if like, again, now we're using these lower molecular, you can actually get collagen production with them. So those would be probably my top
your top off the top. And we'll talk a little bit about some newer ingredients too, but I think that's a good, and you know, probably the not sexy part of our conversation is going to be that we will tend to default to the tried and trues because they have tons of efficacy behind them. We've got tons of studies behind them. We're going to always probably be much less like, oh, this new thing on the market. Although, you know, hyaluronic wasn't being talked about 10, 15 years ago.
Exactly.
And we both totally agree that's fantastic. But usually when we go through trend ingredients, very rarely when I look at the real studies going on, do I find a trend ingredient that I am like, this is better than something that has been around for a long time, or this really is adding something different. But it does happen. You know, I like a lot of peptide stuff I see coming out these days. I think that's exciting for the industry. I do think a lot of kind of what you're talking about, like low weight, high weight, getting a little bit more into the technical side of some of these ingredients that can perform better that way. So I think that's kind of exciting there too.
Tell me a little bit about your experience with peptides. I don't think a lot of people know what those are.
Peptides are a grouping of amino acids, essentially, right? 3 or more amino acids form a peptide. Amino acids are the building blocks of your DNA and basically all your cells. And there's a lot of different, not necessarily all of them being great or better than just basic ingredients. I would say, like, when I look at some of them, I'm like, I like that you can see real efficacy in them when you look at their studies. They do penetrate. They are something that can be used topical, a lot of them, but there's, a million different combinations. So peptides is a category, like saying moisturizer. It's like, well, some of them are going to be fantastic, some not. You really have to look. I've been looking recently a lot at copper peptide. I do like that for elasticity, that you can really see that it's effective for that. I've seen a few other interesting ones. None that I would probably say like, hey, I'm going to tell you on this live webinar that this is better than something else in particular. But I just think it's a growing and interesting industry where I think you will see really effective ingredients coming out of it. So yeah, I would say that's probably just all I would say about peptides at this minute. But
we've got someone that is commenting that they love peptides, so that's great. And we also have a question kind of around those amino acids, peptides, and retinols. So just like tretinoin is the most active form of retinols, why are there so few brands that develop amino acids? I see a lot of focus on peptides, not amino acids.
So there's 26 amino acids, right? They're basically the building blocks of DNA, but they do nothing not in combination. There's a lot of actual amino acids that you do see used in skincare, L-arginines all the time in skincare, but it doesn't serve the purpose that you think it serves as an active. It actually is like a pH adjuster in a skincare ingredient, or you'll see like L-lysine. But amino acids are the reason you don't see amino acids versus peptides as far as like as an active ingredient is that it's like a puzzle. So it's only in combination that they're super effective, right? In terms of doing anything specific in the skin. So they're the building blocks, but you have to build them into something. The peptide is the something you're building it into for this, that the skin can utilize or that can be utilized internally. Hopefully that answers that. Let's talk for a minute about ingredients we don't like. Okay. At least we spent some time chatting about that as well. We both have like our list of things that we think about. I have my little thing I was just thinking about right here. I know I have my number one that I'm always talking about that I don't like. And so I'll talk about that. So my least favorite ingredient to see in an ingredient deck is the word fragrance. And the reason for that is that the way the FDA regulates fragrances is that they're considered a trade secret. And so a fragrance, essentially, when you see the word fragrance in a skincare product, it can contain any multitude of ingredients and you have no idea anymore what's actually in your product. So that's my number one reason I don't. And even with the new MOCA regulations, which are going to require like the listing of like it's, there's allergens or things like that in fragrances, it's still not going to require you to list the list of ingredients. And so kind of like your best case scenario in a fragrance is that it was developed and it's really just a fragrance and it might have anywhere from 12 to 250 ingredients in it to be that actual fragrance. That's actually your best case scenario, because your worst case scenario is that when you get really unethical formulation houses or things and they can hide any ingredient in the world in that fragrance deck and then put the fragrance into your product. So, I mean, you could have parabens in your product and not know it because that's part of the fragrance formula. You could have like all kinds of things that you just have no idea anymore what's in your product when you have a fragrance. The other thing I don't like about fragrances is that they're known free radical damagers when you get exposed to UV, and so talking about free radical, we always talk about it as so bad, but what is it really, right? Which is like, it's things that are basically breaking down your cell structure, breaking down your DNA. It's everything that makes you look old over time. So everything that you're trying to do is not have that happen. And then you have these ingredients in your product that actually are promoting it on the back end. And it isn't that, if you use, a product with fragrances in it for 1 month or something like that you're going to have this huge, horrible impact. But the accumulation over a lifetime of applying an ingredient, especially ingredient that in anywhere on your body that's going to be exposed to the sun with fragrances, it's like almost undermining everything that you're doing, because that's going to lead to free radical damage that you wouldn't have had otherwise. And that's what you're trying to avoid with everything else that you do in your skincare routine, right? So that's my big pet peeve.
Well, and the other thing I think people don't realize is that, fragrant or like fragrance free versus unscented. So if a product says unscented, it doesn't necessarily mean that there isn't a fragrance added to it, but what the company will do is add a neutralizing fragrance so it doesn't have a scent. So when you look for products that you don't want to have a fragrance to it, you have to look for fragrance free. Yeah.
And if you like aromas, which we all like aromas for sure, you can, I am a fan of essential oils. You do have to pay attention to them too, because natural ingredients also have pros and cons. It's not like they're all 100% fantastic or not fantastic for you, but that's a great way because they really are just pressed from a plant and you know exactly what the ingredient is, right? So it's, you can get a fragrance in a product. You're just wanting to make sure you don't see that word fragrance anywhere on it, because that word is the word that contains, you don't know what it contains anymore. If someone comes up with a fantastic smelling product, but every ingredient's listed on there, well, you know what it contains. And so it doesn't mean you can't ever have anything that smells like anything, but just that word itself is the one you want to avoid, because it means something very specific. It means a formula you don't know what's in it put into your product.
Right.
Let's see what here we had. I know you were talking about, which I totally understand. You were mentioning gluten-free to me.
I know.
Talk to me about gluten-free.
So some patients ask me that they want skincare that's gluten-free. And to me, that makes no sense, because gluten is a wheat-derived product, and in your intestines if you have a gluten sensitivity, can cause some upset because of the interaction with the specific antibody. But on the skin itself, gluten is not going to cause the same interaction as it does in your intestines. So it's really funny for me to see a product that says it's gluten-free.
So it's irrelevant in terms of, even if you have celiacs, it's not going to do anything. Now, I work with brands a lot, so I also understand their positioning side, which is that, like, well, people ask for it. They want to know, they want it to be that. And so you need to make a product that's like that. It's also, fortunately, extremely easy to have a gluten-free product, because there's not a lot of actual ingredients that have gluten in the skincare. There's a couple, but there's just not a ton. So I know that's the tough one, is like that combination on my side when we're always working with the brands and we're working with formulas, is that, like, there's the science and the efficacy and this, and then there is the perception out there, the marketing perception, what people think they want, and all of that. It matters equally much in terms of what you're selling, which is always very, finding that balance point for people is hard, but I get that one. So we've talked about alkaline already, and you mentioned too, like, not understanding, not knowing if your ingredients are compatible.
Right. Right.
Do you have any other ones besides, like, the retinols and the benzols? I know I've heard a few, but I can't think of any off the top of my head that are other, like, incompatible. I mean, obviously, you don't want to be using AHAs or retinols in the morning with your sunscreens or, things like that.
Right. That's for sure. And that's not just because it'll make you more susceptible to sunburning, because it'll cause that either way if you use it at night or the daytime. But a lot of the retinols, they become inactivated with the sun. So you're putting it on the skin. It's not going to do anything.
So it's not helpful.
Right.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I think one thing for people to be aware of too is that a lot of times you don't really know that those ingredients are in the product. So, if it's not, if they didn't list, if the product isn't marketed, it could just be marketed as a brightening serum. It's, and it has all those ingredients, and it's not necessarily being marketed as a retinol serum or as an AHA serum or something like that. And so that's an important one to think about.
I have another question. This one came after the fragrance conversation, but this question is, can natural fragrances also contain those same harmful chemicals as if it just says fragrance on the inky?
Well, the answer is, I don't know, because I don't know what's in it. So I'm not, like, super opposed. I know that there are certified natural fragrances out there. And I mean, I certainly work with them. We have clients that work with them, but the real answer is, we don't totally know the answer to that unless the manufacturer of that fragrance is going to give us the ingredient deck to actually be able to pick apart to see whether it does have ingredients that would do that or not. So I think that whole conversation around, natural versus synthetic, I work a ton. I love natural formulation. I work a ton with natural ingredients. And one of my comments is always, which is like, I am a huge proponent. Natural ingredients absolutely work. You can get fantastic formulas using things derived from plants instead of synthetically made in the lab. That being said, they do work, which also means you need to equally respect that there could be side effects and problems and all the same stuff that you would see with any other type of ingredient formulation. And so the answer to that is, without really being able to see that ingredient deck, you don't know if it could have something in it. Okay. I know we were also talking about, which I really think most people know, but I guess you just never know if most people know, because I was talking about collagen, how much I can't stand seeing collagen in skincare and topical skincare products.
Okay. So topically, collagen the collagen is a protein and it's too large in order to penetrate through your epidermis. So topical collagens are useless.
Yeah, they're not going to do anything
Right.
for you.
However, there have been some studies that show oral hydrolyzed collagen. So those, collagen drinks, those actually can
Yeah,
be of benefit to your skin.
I've heard some pretty good things
Yeah.
there too.
Yeah, and but they are animal derived. So from the studies that I've read, the most effective one is from fish protein.
Okay.
And so, and the effectiveness has been shown to be if you ingest them for more than 8 weeks.
Okay.
It can show some benefit to your skin. So there's studies that work that shows that it works.
I wonder, this is not an area I know a ton about because I don't research in like internal, stuff as much, but are there any like vegetable or natural options for that work at all? Or is it really showing it?
Yeah, I haven't seen that
Okay.
yet. Yeah. And
Okay.
I'm sure that'll come down the pike.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes
Yeah.
they don't work as well. I mean, that's
Right.
the thing you have to look at too, right? It's not, nothing's really black or white. There's always you have to pay attention to the actual ingredient. Just same thing. Just because it's from nature doesn't mean, or just because it's vegan versus animal doesn't always mean it behaves the same way or that it's better or worse. It's each one is its own individual thing. How does our body actually utilize it and
Exactly.
work with it?
And that's another thing we've talked about before is diet and whether supplements are as effective as the food that you ingest. And I think the studies have shown that, I mean, supplements are good. They can be helpful, particularly if you have malnutrition or insufficiency. However, overall, your diet, that combination of the vitamins and the antioxidants in your food is going to be more effective than if you just take a supplement.
Yeah, it's the same as, whole foods versus
right.
fast foods or processed foods, right? There isn't really, there's no substitute. There's, and it's like everybody individually, there's, good, better, best, and bad also. So interesting. Let's talk about diet for a minute. So I don't know that this is something a lot of people really know, which is that there really are very significant triggers, if people are triggered by them, that can lead to a lot of skin issues with what they eat. The two that I'm the most aware of are sugar and dairy. I remember I read a study that was saying that processed sugar, meaning not necessarily from like if you eat it in Whole Foods again, but like if you're just eating things or drinking things that have just refined sugar in them, that in this study, I want to say that 50% of the people in this study's acne cleared up 100% by eliminating sugar out of their diet, the refined sugar. Now, but the other 50% didn't, which means it's not a trigger for them in particular, right? So it's each individual body. But I was pretty blown away by that study because I was like, that's a pretty, and it was in a short period of time where it was like a 3-week change, meaning I was like, wow, like if that's actually like your trigger point, you can see that pretty easy. You don't have to wait 6 months to figure out if that might actually be your issue. And then I've heard that for dairy too, not as much, like not as quite as significant, but that also can be a serious trigger for breaking out.
Right. And as far as acne goes, the studies that I've seen show that if you're going to ingest dairy, that whole milk is actually better than skim milk. And it may be the hormone levels, because a lot of the milks that we ingest now, the cows are fed hormones to produce more milk. So if if you are worried about that, I would try to look for milk that has been not processed through hormone free.
So the whole organic whole milk.
Organic whole
better
milk, skim, versus skim. It's interesting.
And whole milk versus skim. Anyway, that's interesting.
Exactly, yeah. And also with acne, they have found that low glycemic diets can be more effective.
Which is the sugar trigger is probably
exactly
right?
It's probably the sugar, and sugar causes glycation in your skin, which means that you're and as far as aging goes as well. So glycation causes your collagen fibers to become cross-linked, and they become more rigid, and you can't undo that. So that's why sugars, as far as aging thing is actually bad for your skin.
That's interesting.
Mhm.
And that's like separate from that's very
like UV
interesting.
damage or
Yeah. Like
or collagen breakdown.
All right. So a low sugar
diet
diet is actually going to lead to not just maybe this breakout concept, but actually less formation of wrinkles and fine lines and, and things as you get older.
And
look younger.
Right. And we know sugar does a lot of bad things to your body as far as your blood vessels, your kidneys.
Well, and that's what I was thinking about in terms of like inflammation, because I'd always associate, but I mean, I guess at the end of the day, inflammation is free radical damage. So that makes sense that they're all really talking about the same things in different ways. Interesting.
I have a question about collagen. Oh, sorry. Hard to hear who's talking or if it stops. So this one is about collagen, but not necessarily the topical collagen. It's more like the support of topical collagen. So the other ingredients that help or are supposed to help collagen formation and collagen synthesis.
You can apply topically that.
Like bamboo extract or horsetail or rosehip or gotu kola. Do those truly support the collagen production and protect collagen from damage and all of those claims, or are those things that are also kind of useless topically?
There definitely are topical. So we were talking about that. So the retinoids, definitely the copper peptides.
Right.
The studies are pretty strong on those for being helpful with that. I like omega fatty acids really a lot. Rosehip oil probably being my favorite to work with that. Not necessarily in the collagen building realm of things, but I do think that that's a really fantastic ingredient to have in your skincare. It does like help strengthen the barrier. It's a great antioxidant. It helps like just, your balanced hydration levels, all of that. It's a really, really good ingredient. I haven't seen a lot that says it's super effective in the collagen side of things. I'm trying to think if I have seen any kind of, like we were talking about bakuchiol, that's going to be, if you're talking about getting really into just like the 100% naturals, and and there are natural derivatives, right? So we talk about like retinoids, vitamin A, that's what we're talking about, right? So there's plenty of ways that you can source that ingredient from a natural plant, right? So copper peptide, not because copper is a mineral, right? Not a plant, but still like, you could make an argument for that to be something coming from nature, Anything else that you've seen on the collagen side that's like, you'd call it a strong, like topical applicator?
I'm not as familiar with the bamboo and what was the other, horsetail? I'm not familiar with those.
I haven't seen, I
don't know.
I've worked with that one. I haven't seen anything that would be like a strong indicator to me that I would put that in over putting some of the other things we just talked about into an ingredient deck.
Christina, what about MSM, the one that provides the sulfur? I feel like I've seen that in a lot of ingredient decks, like even for us.
Yeah, so MSM, I'm gonna put that in a similar category. So MSM actually has some really great topical benefits, but it's not collagen building. It is really great for kind of more skin balancing, more that like biome, like the active biome, kind of balancing out bacteria and things like that. It's fantastic internally. So collagen and MSM internally are great for the skin. They're great for the joints. They're great for everything. But you're going to get a lot better impact if that's your specific purpose for it, taking it internally. I do like it externally as well, but not specifically for collagen building.
I think the other ingredient that we'll be seeing in skincare is antioxidants. Adding antioxidants to products that we wouldn't, like for instance, adding in antioxidants to our sunscreens. So not only are you protecting your skin from future damage with the sunscreen, but you're also actively reversing your sun damage with the antioxidants.
And I think,
trend
so that's omega fatty acids, that's rosehip oil, that's vitamin C, that's, some of the things that we've been talking about. One thing I've been looking at recently, like I don't like the, from the sunscreen perspective, because the FDA regulates sunscreen as an over-the-counter drug. There's actually only 8 ingredients that you can use in your sunscreen. But my recommendation would be to stay away from the oxybenzone and the octinoxate, because both of those actually have been shown to create free radical damage. Oh, when exposed to UV, which is the whole point they're in there for. You're like, so if you're going to, use, pick a different one than that, because you're also that same thing. You got this cycle going on now where it's like, but there are other ingredients that are, better than that. Let's talk about niacinamide.
Oh, okay.
This is one that's like, it's all over trending and all that kind of stuff. And this is one I actually do think has a lot of really good ingredients. So the vitamin B3 kind of deck, they talk about strengthens the skin barrier. It's a great anti-inflammatory. Are you seeing that at all, like from the doctor's perspective? Is that even like on the radar, or is that kind of more just seeing it over here on the trend side more?
No, I think there's been a lot of studies that show that it also helps reduce redness. So you see niacinamide, you also see products like glycyrrhozic acid, which is licorice root extract for redness. So several skincare companies have those 2 ingredients in there when you're dealing with redness from rosacea, redness from acne, redness from sun damage. And actually niacinamide orally, 500 milligrams twice a day, has been shown to reduce skin cancers. So in our patients that have a high, multiple squamous cell carcinomas, basal cell carcinomas, that's what we're recommending, is they take niacinamide twice a day. Interesting.
Is there any thoughts about why that is? Like, I know it's an anti-inflammatory.
I think it's the antioxidation.
Okay. So it's another, all these things are falling into that category, like fantastic antioxidants.
Right.
and like that word antioxidants, like not a very interesting word from just like the general conversation. But if you think about it, it's just like, these are the things that keep you from having free radical damage.
Right.
Free radical damage is the thing that screws everything up. Let's just go with that. It's the thing that's going to make you look old. So it's the anti-looking older.
Right. So I
like become some simple word for that. That like,
well, it's like anti-rust. Like oxidation is what happens when a metal rusts. So if you want to prevent rusting, you want to put an antioxidant on that. That's how I always think about it.
Interesting. Okay. I'm looking over here. I was like, I have a couple. Let's talk about ceramides for a minute.
Oh,
like that's
okay.
one that fits into biomimetic, right? Because our skin makes ceramides. And I see that one a lot. And so I have my own thoughts around it, but I'm curious to know what yours are.
So ceramides are a great ingredient in our skincare. If you think of your epidermis, which is the barrier to getting inside your skin. So your epidermis is made up of keratinocytes, which are your bricks in your skin wall, and that grout that holds that structure secure is made up of free fatty acids, cholesterol, and ceramides. And ceramides are an ingredient we can add back to your skin to help repair all those little nicks and breaks, so less water gets out and less ingredients get in. So particularly, it began really with our patients that have an epidermal barrier disruption. So for instance, eczema. But now we're finding that it's important, as we age, we don't make ceramides as well as we used to. We don't make natural moisturizing factor as well as we used to. So if we're adding that ceramide back to our skin, we're actually improving our barrier, and which is important for all kinds of skin health.
Now, let me ask you this, because you mentioned, so it, kind of sealing the cracks, which means, keeping, moisture in, and, you just mentioned keeping things out. So is there a specific way you'd need to use ceramides? Like, does it actually inhibit like things you want? Like, so it's going to inhibit, like, say, bacteria and weird things from getting in, but is it also going to inhibit like the absorption of other ingredients? Like, would you want to use them separately from anything? Or is that really more just like really, really microscopic things like bacteria and stuff?
No, I think it just helps with your barrier, but I don't think it's an occlusive property. So I think you're going to still have absorption of your ingredients.
Okay, cool. Yeah. Very cool. All right. I think those are kind of some of the things, like talking favorite ingredients. Got any other favorites you didn't think about there or talk about? I know it's hard to like come up. There's so many, there really are a ton of good ingredients.
Right.
It's hard to mention like every single one of them. I do like omega fatty acids. Like someone had mentioned rosehip oil. I do think those are really great in skincare products too.
Is that the same as rose water? Because I've seen a lot of products now with rose water.
Not at all, actually. So rose water is going to be a hydrosol from rose flowers.
Okay.
People like that because that's skin softening. That's the main reason. It smells nice too, but the main reason that people put it into products is because it's skin softening. Rosehip oil is a fatty acid. It's a natural plant that produces really high omega fatty acids. And so two different things, but both good ingredients that way. Let's talk for a minute before we wrap up here about the basics of a good skincare routine from a doctor's perspective. When you're talking to someone, what really matters, what doesn't matter. We can go, maybe I'll just go through like the whole list. So you talked about cleanser, and you said gentle cleanser specifically. Talk to me about what you're thinking around that, a gentle cleanser, and what does that mean versus like an aggressive cleanser or something like that.
So, cleansing is important to remove the surface dirt, the accumulation of oils, remove your makeup. You don't have to be aggressive. Soap is considered a surfactant. So what that does is it traps oil and dirt and then rinses it away from the skin. Now there's products such as micellar water. I'm sure that's another big trend that I've seen. Micellar water is actually using less surfactant, so it's more gentle to your skin, and it creates this mycel where you have the surfactant is actually, there's the lipophilic tail is on the inside of the mycel, where the hydrophilic water-loving head is on the outside, and it forms this. So they can use less surfactant in a larger, percentage of water. So it's more gentle, and it's very effective with cleaning your skin. They can add things such as rose water to it for the moisture. And so that's a really nice cleanser to use, particularly if you have sensitive skin. So cleansing is important.
And what would you say would equal a harsh, type of cleanser you'd want to stay away from? Is that things that have a lot of, is it, AHAs in it, or is it like kind of like, I guess my question's kind of like, or is it just like a really high surfactant level that's going to be kind of more like leave your skin feeling tight?
So high surfactant is going to definitely strip those oils off your skin, and you don't want to remove all the oil off your skin. Oil is important, so you want to use something that's gentle, that and that doesn't have that's not going to strip the oil. That doesn't, you don't need a salicylic acid cleanser if you have acne. The salicylic acid percent does very minimally to your skin as far as cleansing per se and removing oil.
One of the things I always like to talk about too is I'm like, a cleanser, like, yes, you want it to cleanse, but like that isn't the place to add all the things in. Like you really, it's just washing off of your face. If you want to, anything that you really want to add in, that's really effective. You want to do it in other steps that you're not washing off of the face.
Exactly. So say for instance, you have acne and you want to use a benzoyl peroxide cleanser. A lot of times I'll tell patients, apply it to the skin and leave it on for 2 to 3 minutes before you rinse it off. Otherwise, you're just washing that ingredient right off your skin.
That's a tip I never thought about before. So if you have a cleanser that you really like, and because it has certain ingredients in it that you're wanting your skin to get, it's almost like using it like a masking, like you just stick it on, leave it on for a little while, then wash it off.
Yes.
But it's still going to beg the question of, is that the most effective delivery of whatever it was you were wanting to get onto your skin at that time, right?
And then I think the next ingredient would be some sort of toner to, again, not to remove oils, but to set the pH of your skin, to hydrate your skin, and to help the other ingredients fall and penetrate better.
Let me ask you about like, what's your thoughts around, let's say manual exfoliation products, like, scrubs and things like that. What's your thinking there?
I think the problem with those is that they can be a little too aggressive and they can irritate your skin. And I know a lot of patients will use them, like for instance, for acne. But I think it can aggravate your skin, cause more inflammation. And so my feeling is it's better to use a topical exfoliator, such as a retinol, such as a AHA.
So we'll call like a chemical exfoliation is
Exactly.
going to be better.
Right.
Now, would you think, like, say, let's go back to cleanser again, like if a product has like a very gentle glycolic, or are they going to get any benefit in a cleanser format for that, or is it still better to kind of have a leave-on application for it?
I think it's going to be better to have a leave-on.
Better if I have a leave-on application. Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So that's going to
things. Oh,
What's that?
sorry. I've got a couple of things about this. So I got a text message and a comment on here, and people are so happy that you guys are talking about how those sorts of things in cleansers are just being washed off and they're not as effective, and not to put too much stock in those. So they're real happy about that. But my husband coming in with a solid men question here. What is the best and easiest skincare for men to use, especially those in their mid-30s? What do you think, Dr. Orlick?
Oh gosh, put me on the spot. So
Your
you know,
same three.
I know, exactly. So, I think so many of the products on the market are just marketed towards
Men, but
they're
not different,
right,
except for the
exactly.
smell, maybe. Or
Right. I mean,
something.
men's skin, the muscles are stronger. Testosterone could cause more oil production because of the oil glands are stimulated by the androgens. So I think for me, I always tell patients, men, my male patients, to find what they like, because men are inherently don't want to do a lot of skincare to their face. I mean, maybe the younger generation is beginning to, but use what they like and what they'll use on a regular basis. But again, cleanser, toner, moisturizer, sunscreen. Those are my main ingredients for.
And they could probably skip the toner if they don't really. They're not going to do it. What I would say when I think about that is, it is nice, exactly what she said. The thing I have seen, and this is not true just for men, but it's true for sort of anybody who's never done anything in skincare. So what I will find is that, the younger generations are a little bit different, but men in general will tend to have one product that they use, and it's a product that they found on their wife's counter, and then they like it, and then they use it, but they use 10 times as much of it. And they'll stick with it. And so like you're saying, is like, I would just say, like, probably the number one thing if a guy does nothing is moisturizing, because you will see a huge difference in that. Well, yeah, sunscreen, you'll see a huge difference over time, but you can have those two things even be combined.
Right.
So like that's, if you're going to only use one product, a guy will probably see the most benefit just from doing that if he's been using nothing at all. But then following up with just a cleanser, but also being very careful if you're somebody who never uses product, that you are, some things that can seem extremely gentle. Like this happened to me one time. Like I've got these little 3% glycolic acid pads. They're very gentle. I could use 10 of them a day and they'd be fine, right? On my face, because I use things on my face, right? And so like my boyfriend had used it, and it's like his nose was like peeling because he'd never used anything in his whole life. And so it's just being really aware that like everything's going to be very much stronger. Like guys don't actually need stronger ingredients. A lot of times what they need if they've been using nothing is less ingredients, or lower percentages of ingredients. But if you're only going to pick one thing, moisturize with sunscreen.
With sunscreen. Yep, I agree.
Hopefully that helps a little. Okay, I forgot what we were chatting about before that. Oh yeah, we're talking about the basics of a good skincare routine. So we're talking about cleansers. We talked a little bit manual versus chemical exfoliations, toner, mists, however people want to list it these days. Toner, I feel like as a word is sort of out. So it's like, it's a mist or a hydrosol. But basically what it is it's a water step or a liquid phase that's going to help the penetration of your ingredients afterwards.
Then I would recommend serums.
Mm-hmm. Do you have do you have anything that you'd say, like in terms of a favorite of, say, ingredients that you prefer to see in a serum versus, say, like just in your moisturizer as a whole? Do you have any thoughts around that at all? Or
I think with serums, they usually are more oil-based or you can have water-based serums, but but I do think that that's going to be the first thing that's going to penetrate your skin. So you probably want to use something that's got a good alpha hydroxy or some sort of antioxidant.
Well, because I see so many, variations in serums. So like, serums that seem to be so vitamin C serums tend to be very popular. They tend to have, the higher vitamin percentage than like a cream will typically kind of hold. I see a lot of hyaluronic serums, which are typically a water-based serum. And people will usually use that kind of under their moisturizer, so face layer 1, layer 2 of moisturizing. Then you see, the retinol. So like these, now we're talking about the kind of exfoliating type ones with the AHAs or the retinoids in them. But then I have like this whole category I call like restoring versus refinishing. I'll call it refinishing, restoring. So that's like niacinamides and the ceramides and things like that. Do you have any thoughts around like, I don't know, I guess too much to use, or can you just keep layering them all on and you're just going to get better benefits, or what's your thoughts around that?
Well, it's hard. That's a hard question. It just depends if they're compatible. But I think too much could be too much of a good thing. I think at a point, I just don't know how you, unless you're spending all morning putting on products,
which some people do.
Yeah.
There's definitely a whole like culture around that too, right? Just like that. I don't know. And we could
that slugging
probably, probably the whole thing too, kind of just about like how people hold that, right? If it's like, if they can't leave the house without having done it, it's like, well, is it a crutch or is it self-care? That's going to be individual to each person too.
Right. And I do think that, personalized skincare, just like personalized medicine is going to become more the norm, where, everybody's skin is different. And so something that you may tolerate very well, I might not. So I think that's going to be the future that we're looking at. Okay, tell me more about your skin so we can develop a plan and figure out what ingredients work best for you, or what, because even like for vitamin C's, not all of them are stable once they are applied to the skin. So you can't just go to the store and say, oh, I need a vitamin C because my doctor told me.
And the same vitamin C that you like take internally is not the best for your skin. And also like even different versions of vitamin C, you can see different people will metabolize differently.
Exactly.
So, we are really all very individual. So let me ask you a question around that, which is from a doctor's perspective, if you put something on your skin, like let's just say, anything in these core things that we think are pretty good, or, anything else that's kind of on the market, and, let's just say that doesn't have a bunch of free radical damaging things in it. We'll start there. Like, can you just, would you recommend kind of like, well, hey, like if it didn't bother you, like if I'm using a manual scrub and my skin's fine, is that then just fine? Like, is it personal to me and I can kind of use whatever works for me? And as long as I don't see it messing up my skin, does that seem like a decent way for people to think about whether something's going to be okay for them or not?
Well, that's
what I'm asking.
Not necessarily.
Okay, good. Well, that's
necessarily. Yeah.
Okay.
So that's why I think, I just think it's a personal thing. You're going to have to find ingredients that work well with your skin, that are of benefit, that isn't just a marketing ploy by the companies.
Yeah.
Doing
your research into the brands is so critical. Like, what do they really do? Because you can't actually tell looking at your ingredient deck.
Right.
And even if it has everything in it, it's really hard to tell if it necessarily has everything in it at the levels that needs to be in it, or if it's just put in there so that they can list it. You know what I mean? Like just looking at the ingredient deck's tough. So knowing your brands matters a lot. Like how they formulate, what their philosophy is with, they have integrity.
But the one thing though, with an ingredient list is that they're listed in order of concentration.
Yes.
Is that right?
Well, they should be.
I mean, so if you see something that says,
but not at 1%. So at 1% or less, you can change it around in any order.
Oh,
which there's a lot of things that are at 0.25 or 0.5 or 0.8 or whatever, and that's a very effective ingredient, but maybe not at 0.001. But you can still mix that up into any direction at 1% or less.
I see.
That's on the ingredient deck, and that's also assuming that the ingredient list is correct, right? Yeah. Which is there's definitely some fast and loose that can happen out there on that side too sometimes. Or just a lack of knowing, you know, sometimes with smaller brands, they don't necessarily always know about that. Now with the new MOCA regulations, registration and all that kind of stuff, you're gonna see that. Well, you're gonna see it tighten a bit, but.
And what does MOCA stand for?
And that is the new Modernization of Cosmetics Regulation Act that the Congress passed last year. The FDA is in charge of enforcing it, and it deals with manufacturing facilities. So everything that we do, it also deals with brands. They have to register their products. They have to, you know, really like they have to be able to support claim statements now, which they didn't have before.
So before they could say, oh, this will make you look like you're, you know, 25, and now they can't do that anymore.
No, and it's even kind of more just like, you know, hey, this is, you know, this supports collagen building. Well, you have to have some sort of documentation that shows that there's a reason you think it would do that. Not just statement to it. It's good, and it's also a ton of documentation, a ton of, you know, especially for smaller brands. You know, that's kind of they get caught up. Now, it doesn't actually apply to any brand doing less than $1 million a year in business. So, like, you know, the local kind of brands will end up kind of being out of that, but anybody doing over $1 million a year in business is going to have to do all the registration and all the documentation around claim statements or maintain documentation should they be asked for it.
Interesting.
So there's like, you know, like all things pros and cons. You get into big regulation and it's going to be like, you know, very laborious in a lot of ways. And then also there'll be some good things that will come out of it. And there'll be companies that figure out all the technicalities around it. And it's just going to be like business always is in that regard. All right. So we've talked about serums, and then moisturizers. Do you have anything in particular you look for in a moisturizer that you would say, like, let's talk a nighttime one, not a sunscreen morning thing.
Usually for nighttime, people like something a little more moisturizing, thicker. So creams are usually, creams are usually more moisturizing than a lotion is. So I think, from my understanding, a lotion, you add a type of something to thin out the product. Yeah,
they're really, from a formulation standpoint, they're not actually different. There's just different percentages of ingredients in them, like, you know, how much of the thickener does it have in it and stuff. From a formulation standpoint, it's just a texture thing. Do you think it's effective to add actives into your nighttime moisturizer?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. So you can still get good penetration of ingredients even when you have thick, a thicker sort of, formulation happening. I think so too, but I'm just curious always to know what a doctor thinks about. All right. Well, I think that kind of is going to just wrap us up for today. Anything else you thinking about?
No, I mean, there's just, the problem with the skincare industry is that there's so much information out there that it's even confusing for
we're studying it all the time, and you're still always like, wait, what?
What's this? Never heard of that. I have to look that up. I mean, and patients will come to me and ask me, what do you think about this and that? And, honestly, I have to say, I don't know that much. I have to do the research. So, and it's just changing.
Well, it's always the trends. It's always, there's always ingredient trends. There's always new ways of applying thing trends. Let's actually wrap up with, that's my question too, is it problematic for people to constantly be trying new things, constantly trying a different formula, a different product, a different this or that? Like, is there any downside to that for people?
Well, I think with changing up your product is that, first of all, I don't think you're going to give it enough time to see the benefits of it. I mean, nothing is instantaneous. So unless you're doing something that, okay, I just want to plump up my skin, like that little eye cream that you apply that acts like
turns into glue.
Yeah, exactly.
It is actually a glue.
Right. So, I mean, like the face tapes, or, I mean, all these things, are they really working? I mean, I think if you change up your products too quickly, you may be counteracting ingredients. You may not be seeing the benefit of them. If you're
so like a good product actually does really take real time, other than like, I always call it like what's called the front end ingredients. I'm like the simple ones where you see the immediate thing. Is it like if it's refinishing, cellular turnover, or it's hydrating, moisturizing, those two, those kinds of things you can see relatively quickly in the skin. But if you're trying to accomplish anything else, if you're trying to deal with hyperpigmentation or elasticity or wrinkles, or even like sensitivities in the skin, what would you say, 6 months? to use a product to really
I would
know
say-
whether
I would
it's
say, yeah.
doing something for you?
I would say 3 to 6 months.
3 to 6 months.
Mhm.
And then my thing is I'm always like, the only times I think it's really appropriate to change skincare routines. I mean, I do think over a period of time, like we said, like giving something a break and using something else, like, kind of like exercising. If you do the exact same thing for 5 years straight, it might be time to make a little shift and kind of just shake it up a little bit. Is weather, like in
Right,
the winter, you
exactly.
really change your products around in the summer. So humidity, dry,
Right.
cold, those kinds of things, you should be definitely changing your skincare routine around.
Right.
All right. Well, we're going to just wrap it up. I really appreciate you coming and hanging out with me today, like we do anyway, but doing it on camera for us.
Yeah.
All right, everyone, have a fantastic day. We will see you later. Bye.
Bye.